First,
Let's
I'm part of this program and our distinguished speaker, and 1 year my senior and École Normale is Thierry Coquan.
Okay, so there will be two parts in this talk. So the first part will be for people familiar to simple type theory. I will try to motivate why some of us are interested in dependent type theory. And for this, so I will compare, I will try to compare different formalism for representing mathematics, set theory, simple type theory, and type theory with or without univalence axiom. So yesterday, Shankar emphasized the importance of libraries for formalization of mathematics. So this is a very important aspect. One other aspect is the logical system that we are using for representing mathematical structures, and how well it is suited for doing modular development. And so the main theme, one of the main themes of this part will be that extensionality principle in mathematics is very important actually for modular development of mathematics. So that's what I will look at, the status of extensionality axiom in these systems. And we will see actually that there is a kind of stratification. So set theory and simple type theory are, satisfy some form of extensionality. And the univalence axiom can be seen as a very strong form of extensionality axiom. So that's why we are interested. That's why this can be interested in formalization of mathematics, because extensionality is important for modular. So since this is an important principle, it's natural questions if it can be justified. So this has been done by, for simple type theory by Robin Gandhi, actually. So he showed, he developed a relative consistency proof of simple type theory with extensionality, relative to simple type theory without extensionality. So I will try to explain the connections between this and some model of univalence. Okay, so first, Church simple type theory. So as was said yesterday, so this is a remarkable system because it's extremely simple and natural. So we have a type, I will use a type bool as a type of propositions, and a type I for individuals. And then for Church, so the only type operation that he had was function type. Okay. But we can add product type as well, if we want. And for this system, so we have a natural semantics of a type as a set. Okay, so there is a clear correspondence in this sense how to interpret type as set. And we'll explain later how to interpret set as types. I mean the connection, the reverse directions between types and sets. So some remark, about notion of function that we have in simple type theory. So in simple type theory, so this type of function is abstract. So we don't say that the function is a functional graph like in set theory. So this notion of abstraction will be important for type theory, for modular aspect of type theory. So what we have, how to introduce a function in this system is by a mechanism of lambda abstraction, or explicit definitions, which is this one. And so I assume that everybody in this audience is familiar with this way of defining function in simple type theory. So the only thing I want to say is that I will use this, the usual notation in combinatory logic, so FF or applications, function applications. Okay. So in this system, so we have two notions of functions, actually. Because like in set theory, we can define the notion of functional graph, and we have a notion of function which is defined explicitly by a term. So there is a natural question how they are related, and Church introduced special operations, the iota symbols, which connect these two notions. And iota and the axiom of description, which is that if you have a unique witness for a predicate, then iota is a witness. It's such a witness. So this is important in simple type theory to connect the two notions of functions. And I will not explain this in my talk, but what I find remarkable logically is that the development in around univalent type theory gives a new justification of this axiom of description. So, what are the rules of equality in simple type theory? So, I will split those rules in two parts, a purely logical part and a mathematical part. So, what are the purely logical rules of equality? So, there are two rules. It's very simple. First one is that A is equal to A, reflexivity. And the other rule is that if A0 is equal to A1, then any property of A0 is equal to rules also for A1. Okay. So if we analyze these two rules, we see that 1, so given the second law, 1 is actually equivalent to the fact that if A0 is equal to A1, A0 is equal to A1 from the fact that A0 and A1 share the same property. Okay, so we can use this actually, and that was what Church was doing in his paper. So he defines actually equality is not a primitive symbol of his system. Equality is defined by this formula, logical formula. So he defines A0 equal A1 by the fact that A0, any property of A0 is a property of A1. Okay, so doing this, I mean, we don't have any axioms about equality. Everything can be derived. Okay, so but for Church, so this was not enough for development of mathematics. What we need are the axiom of extensionality. So this axiom in set theory, it's absolutely fundamental. I mean, it's the first axiom of set theory. And in type theory, in Church system, so it has two forms, because there are two ways of forming types, type of proposition and type of functions. Okay, so what does this axiom say? Well, first, it says that two equivalent propositions, logically equivalent propositions are equal, and secondly, two pointwise equal functions are equal. That's how Church formulated the axiom of extensionality. So in his paper, he stated only function extensionality, and he said one was not stated explicitly, that was stated as a possibility, and later all version of simple type theory includes one. So what happened later also is that this system of Church, which is very natural, was modified by Henkin and Andrews, and they reformulated the rules of simple type theory by taking equality as the only logical primitive. So for instance, for all can be defined using equality. So you can say that P holds for all x by saying that the function lambda x px is equal to the function lambda x2. And then you can define true as being the fact that lambda xx is equal to lambda xx. It is possible actually to reformulate simple type theory in this way, and I think this is the way that is used in the system HOL, for instance. So there's two axioms of extensionality, so they are really important for modularity of reasoning. So if we prove something about a function f and another function g is pointwise equal to f, we can replace f by g and conclude that the property also holds for g. Okay, so that's very important for modularity. Similarly, if we prove that p is logically equivalent to q, we can replace p by q in any context. Okay, so this is really important, and this is not valid in dependent type theory without univalence. Okay, so in dependent type theory, we don't have these two principles. Okay. However, so one can wonder, but how was it possible to develop mathematics in type theory, dependent type theory, without having these two principles? For instance, for the proof of the four-color theorem or the proof of the Feld-Thomson. So what happened was that there was a following observation, is that propositional extensionality is provable for propositions that are represented by Boolean, by decidable propositions. Okay. And this is what happened actually, why the use of propositional extensionality does not appear in the dependent type theory. And also, so what about function extensionalities? Well, what happens for those two proofs is that those two proofs, they talk about a concrete object, first order object. Okay, and the fact that objects are first order implies that we don't really need the function extensionality, because we will never really need to talk about functions, or not in an essential way. And for instance, so in the proof of group theory, so they consider function on finite domain, but then what they do is represent a function by its graph. And this is possible, and then the intentional equality of graph corresponds to extensional equality of functions. So in this way, that's why the need of functional equality is not really visible in this part of mathematics, formalized in dependent type theory. But this will be a problem, so as soon as we want to represent more abstract objects, like for instance a category, or we want to talk about functions. Okay. That's why we will need extensionality. So that's summary of function extensionality in simple type theory. So what about, the connections between set theory and type theory in the reverse direction? So how to represent actually set theory and type theory. So if we look at the representation of simple type theory in Gödel's paper, so it was about type theory actually, so Gödel incompleteness theorem. So what Gödel did was to restrict simple type theory to the following type. So type of individual, one, and then only have type formations predicate on the type of individual, then predicate on predicate, and so on. So that's a simplification of simple type theory that Gödel used. And atomic formula are only of the form of B of U, where B is of type n plus 1 and U is of type n. And this can be read as U belongs to the class B. And if we start from I, which is the empty collections, we get a cumulative hierarchy, because I will be included into this type, and this will be probability. So the extensionality axiom becomes the following axiom. So for LXN, so if you have two elements of type n plus 1, they are equal as soon as they have the same element. So the class is completely determined by its elements. And then you have some coding of pairs, so you don't need variable for binary or n-ary functions. And functions, can be defined as functional graphs. Okay, so this is how you connect set theory to type theory. And this is so this is the connections. And then what you do is that in set theory, so instead of having only the type 1, 2, 3, and so on, you iterate this type of predicates transfinitely. Okay, so in set theory, we start with I empty collections, and then we transfinitely iterate subset formations. So types becomes ordinals, and then we can quantify over variable ranging over all types. Okay, and this is well described in the following citation of Dana Scott, okay, so which is in this paper, so which was very important for actually history of formalization of mathematics, because it was from this paper that Robin Milner introduced the system LCF, and then later it was simplified to HOL. So Dana Scott described the connections between simple type theory and set theory, and he claimed, so he states that set theory is based on the notion of type theory, so where we iterate the subset formations. And then we have this ordinal number, okay, that represents the stage of this iteration of the subset construction. So that's how to connect set theory and type theory. So now we are going to look at something that cannot be represented nicely in a simple type theory. And this is how to talk about collections of collections. Okay? So how to talk about collections of mathematical structures. And there will be two issues there. So how to represent a collection of mathematical structures, for instance, a collection of groups. That will be one question. The second question will be when two such structures can be or should be identified. Okay? And so these two questions are fundamental for modularity, and the answer to the second questions will provide a new and important form of extensionality principle. And this principle is closely connected to study in computer science, so the importance of representation independence results for modular development of programs. So we will have something which is closely connected to this idea. Okay, so we want to talk about algebraic structures and collection of algebraic structures. For instance, collection of groups, collection of lattices. So what are these structures? So they are set or type equipped with some operations and relations satisfying some property. Okay? And so when to identify two such structures, the answer is provided by mathematical practice. So mathematical practice says that the natural way to identify two structures is when they are isomorphic. Okay? So for instance, the notion of initial structures, we have a uniqueness up to isomorphism. Okay, so at this level, so identification should be isomorphism. So this is a level actually of structure which has been considered by Bourbaki in his theory des structures. So for instance, two isomorphic group, G and H, so they satisfy, so the remark is that they satisfy the same structural property. So if G and H are isomorphic, so if G is abelian, we know that H is abelian as well. If G is solvable, then we know that H is solvable. So in set theory, it doesn't quite work, because we can ask questions about the group that talks about the elements of the group. So for instance, we can ask, does the number pi belongs to the set G? And this can be true for G and not true for H, despite the fact that G and H are isomorphic. Okay, so because of this, so this is a problem actually for modularity. And because of this, so Bourbaki introduced the notion of transportable properties. Okay, that are the properties that can be transported along isomorphisms. Okay, and this has a long history, so this goes back at least to Russell relation arithmetic. He considers this kind of why notion of isomorphism is important. Okay, so at the next level, so that's one level, and so this notion of identification is important for modular reasoning. So next level will be collection of collections. So for instance, the collection of all groups on one side, collection of all sets on the other side. Can we identify these two collections? Okay. Or when are two such collections considered to be the same? And there again, so there is an answer coming from mathematical practice, and I will illustrate it on the following example, on two examples. So first example will be the two following collections. So if we have B a set, we can look at the set of family of sets over the set B on one side, and the collection of all sets above B, so set X together with a set Y together with the functions from Y to B. Okay, so there are two collections that we can form, and the mathematical practice tells us that these two collections should be actually identified, okay, because they satisfy the same structural transportable properties. Okay, so and these two collections, so description. So one is a collection of family of sets, and the other is a collection of arrow of codomain, a fixed codomain B. Okay, and what happens if we look at why these two collections should be identified? So is that we have two maps going back and forth, F and G. Okay, like this. So to any, if X is a collection of sets, we can associate the total set sigma BNB XB and the first projection. And in the other direction, if we have functions of codomain B, we can associate the family of fiber of this function. Okay, so we have two functions going back and forth between these collections. But the new phenomena is that these two functions are not inverse to each other. Okay, so if we compose GF, we don't get quite something which is equal to X, but we only get something which is isomorphic to X. Okay, so this is a new kind of, a generalization of the notion of isomorphism, and this is a notion of categorical equivalence between group bodies. And mathematical practice tells us that these two collections should be identified. And this is definitively important for modularization of reasoning, so definitively relevant for formalization of mathematics. Okay. So, and this is really, I mean, for me at least, it's really counterintuitive. So, for instance, if we take following collections, so we take all linear orders with 27 elements, a fixed number of elements, in a given Grothendieck universe. So this is a large collections, which is definitively not an element of the universe we start with. But with this coming from mathematical practice, it tells us that we should identify these very large collections to the groupoid with only one object and one morphism. Okay? Because there is no automorphism in this, for this element. This is really a surprising new kind of identification. And this is, so the importance of this is mathematics is well expressed by this citation, so from Poincaré.
It's going to ask.
So that's really, I mean, the importance of being able to connect two structures that looks very different. Okay, so we prove something about one, and then we derive something about some other collection that is, seem to have nothing to do with it. So the question is how to represent this notion of identification. And this is not really well represented in set theory. Okay, so if we look at where collections of groups is represented in set theory, so it's represented using the notion of Grothendieck universe. Like a Grothendieck universe is a set as any other set. Okay, so it comes with its own notion of equality, which is a global notion of equality for sets, and which is not the mathematical notion of identification that we want at this level. Okay. And what is worse is that if we try to generalize the notion of transportable properties, the further level, it becomes really complicated. So the main message of, one main motivation for univalent type theory is that all this is quite elegantly represented in dependent type theory extended with the univalent section. That's why univalent section is important. One reason why it's important. Okay. So what's the situation in simple type theory? So in simple type theory, the problem is that we cannot, as formulated by Church, we cannot express the notion of arbitrary structures. So in Church system, we cannot state something like let X be a type, then we can do something. In set theory, so this is solved by the fact that we can quantify over all sets. So in type theory, the solution is standard by now. So it's to introduce variables ranging over types, like in ML. But even with this, what we cannot do in simple type theory is to form the type of all given groups. Okay. And in set theory, this is possible because of Grothendieck that are introduced precisely in order to form a set of given set of all groups in a given universe. So in type theory, so the generalization of simple type theory is first generalization is to introduce a universe which will be a type similar to Grothendieck universes. So this will be a type, and the elements of this type which will be type. So this was a notion that was already present in the system Automat. And then once we introduce this notion of universe, we can use sigma type to represent the type of structure. So the type of, for instance, this will be the type of all X type with an element and a binary operation. So given the universe, we can introduce this type. So this is good for representing structures. But as soon as we introduce this type U, we get dependent type, because the dependent type of a natural number, for instance, will be a type NAT or U, and we have introduced the type U, so we need dependent type. So one parenthesis, which is connected to the talk, more technical talk I will give on Thursday, is that this limitation of simple type theory, it holds also for the notion of elementary topos. Okay. So we have exactly the same problem, that we cannot represent in a natural way, so universe, collection of structures. And this limitation is well understood semantically. So elementary topos, it's a kind of axiomatization of the notion of sheaf model. And if we look at what happens for sheaves, if you look at the collection of sheaves, actually over the so if you define f of v as a collection of sheaves over an open set of v, so what you get is something which has a restriction of directions. Okay, so it's a pre-sheaf, but it is not a sheaf. It's something else. It's a stack, something which is called a stack. Okay, so you see that as soon as you want to look at sheaf models, you have exactly this issue: how to represent the universe structure. And this notion of there comes mathematically. This notion of isomorphism comes coming. So it's not something quite natural, actually, semantically, that you need to consider also isomorphisms and not only equality. Okay, but that was a parenthesis. So as soon as you introduce dependent types, so as noticed in Automat, you can represent logical connective, and I only want, so I think that everybody in this audience is familiar with this. I only want to give, to show these citations from Knuth, actually, which describes very well actually, what happens in this when you do this. Is that so what happens that you get a system which works only by type declarations, without the need of traditional logic. So this is really so you replace the notion of provability by the notion of building an element of a given type. Really nice citation. But no, so we know how to represent structures. So once you have introduced universe, but now the problem is how to represent the notion of identification. Okay? And that will be the second source of dependent types. So that will be this type identity type, which actually is is better described as a type of identification. Okay? So this terminology comes from Bob Harper, and I think it's really good. So this type should be called the type of identifications between A0 and A1.
Proposed by Andre Joyal, the terminology.
Oh, okay, good. So Andre Joyal and then Bob Harper. Yeah. So this is really good because actually, as we saw, so we want to identify two structures. That's identification, and there may be several isomorphisms between two given structures. In general, a structure has a lot of automorphisms. Okay, so in this way, we understand that there can be different identifications for different A first. So not like in set theory where you have a global notion of equality. And also you understand that this type formation can be iterated. So we can form the type of identifications between identifications. Because we may be interested in how to identify identifications. Okay, and this is like universals. This introduces different types in calculation. Okay, so, and with this type of identifications, now we can define actually some properties of types. And one property is to be a proposition. So when a type will be a proposition, it will be when any two elements are identified, can be identified. When a type is a set, it will be when the type of identification is itself a proposition. And then when a type is a groupoid, it will be that when the type of identification is a set. Okay, so with these definitions, we see that type theory appears as a generalization of set theory. So contrary to the connection between simple type theory and set theory, where simple type theory had natural semantics in terms of sets, when we introduce these notions, semantically, we see that we manipulate notions that are not coming from set theory, more general than set theory. And I will also use this type of, which means that A is a singleton, which means that A is inhabited, and A is a proposition. So what are the laws of identifications? So the logical laws are the following. So they are similar to the laws of identity type equality for simple type theory. So that any element can be identified with itself. And if A0 is identified to A1, any identification of A0 to A1 will give a transport function from B of A0 to B of A1. Okay, so this looks formally like the laws of equality for type theory. But now there is a new meaning, which means that this substitution of equal for equal can also represent a transport function. So this represents well the notion of transport of structures of Bourbaki. And then there was a new law of identification, so, which was discovered by Martin Löf, and which is really mysterious. And one way to formulate this law is that this type is contractible. So this summarizes the logical law of identification, and that was the situations we had for dependent type theory before univalence. And something was missing. And what was missing was extensionality principle. Okay? And what is this extensionality principle? It says that two types should be identified. An identification between two types is exactly an equivalent between these two types. And what is remarkable is that this notion of equivalence between types, which generalize in a uniform way the notion of logical equivalence, bijections, categorical equivalence can be expressed in 2 lines. So it's formally very simple. And then we can state that any equivalence gives an identification in this elegant also formulation. So that's, this we can see as a generalization of Church propositional extensionality, because whenever we have an equivalence has always an inverse. So in particular, so we get that any 2 logically equivalent propositions are equal. Okay. So the type of groups in a given universe will be represented in this way. And so what is an important property of type theory is that when we use this, so it's like abstract data type in computer science, we don't have access to the internal structure of G. So we cannot ask, does 0 belongs to G, for instance. In this way, we get a good modular representation of structure. And so this is remarks, so that type theory is more abstract, modular than set theory. In simple type theory, so we have one extensionality axiom for each possible type formation, proposition of function types. So we can think of univalence axiom as giving the form of extensionality for the universe. And one remark by one theorem of Voivovsky is that this implies function extensionality. So contrary to simple type theory, where we need propositional extensionality and function extensionality, in type theory, univalence implies function extensionality. Okay, so that was the first part of the talk about general, description of extensionality axiom as a modularity principle, and the fact that the univalence axiom is a strong form of extensionality, which should be important for modular formalization of mathematics. So now I will describe very quickly some remarks about very general remarks, so not too technical, about how to justify in some way, so how to interpret extensionality axiom. So I will, as I said, so for simple type theory, this was done by Robin Gandy in his PhD thesis. And the idea is to notice that every operation of type theory is extensional. So whatever you can form in type theory, you will form only extensional objects. So what does that mean? That means, so let's give an example. So in type theory, we have quantifiers that are functional of this type. Okay? So the remark of, starting remark of Russell and Robin Gandy is that this operation is extensional. Okay? So what does that mean? That means that if we have P and Q that are extensionally equal, predicates on I, so that means that Px and Qx are logically equivalent for any x, then for all P and for all Q are logically equivalent. And this can be proved in simple type theory with extensionality. So this is the starting point of relative consistency proof. In simple type theory, you can only build extensional object, so you will be able to justify extensionality. And this is what you can do by internal model construction. So ideally, we would like to do the same for dependent type theory. So we would like to have internal justification of univalence axiom by internal model construction. So we can. So what I will describe that we can almost do this, but not quite. So that's, but it's almost works in this way. So I mean, the first attempt is to do it in one step, like in simple type theory. So to have a relativization of types so that we are sure that we manipulate only extensional constraints. So this I don't know how to do, and I don't know if it's possible. But instead, we will do something in 2 steps. So first step, we will build a relational model of type theory, where a type is interpreted not by a type, but by a type with a relation, and a relation over this relation, and so on. And this is described as mathematically in a simple way. So formally, it's quite simple. It's a Preshift model of type theory, which can be seen as a higher order generalization of the reflexive graph model of type theory. So type is interpreted by a relation with a relation of relation, but everything is reflexive. And that's what is important. So that's the obstacle to do it directly, is that you have first to do reflexive relation. So this can be done formally as a Preshift model. And in this model, we have actually internalization of the type of relation on the type, which can be seen as an exponential, actually a to the I, where I is a special Preshift, which represents the interval. Okay? So with this first step, we can represent the notion of identification as path, which will be represented by functions from the interval to the type A, but we will have only the reflexivity part, the laws of identification. So what is missing is this part, okay, that transport part. Okay, so it's not the case with this very simple model. What we have is only reflexive relation, but we don't have the transport principle. So what to do next? And all this, as I said, so it's a Preshift model of type theory, and this is really actually formally simple. How does it work? The context is interpreted by the Preshift. The dependent type is interpreted by a Preshift on the category of elements of gamma, and this is interpreted as a global section. And then it's by now it's standard to interpret the universe. If we have a Grothendieck universe, U, so U of X will be the collection of U Preshifts on the category of element of X seen as a Preshift. So that's formally very simple. I mean, this part is very simple. So, what we need is this reflexivity transport principle, which is actually the same question as how can we generalize the notion of equivalence relation. What we need is a higher order generalization of equivalence relation. And there, so surprise, is that the answer comes from a topology. So what we get in this model are things that are appears in topology, this notion of cubical set. And from topology, actually, some people have designed a notion of generalization of equivalence relation. And this was formulated I think, by Eilenberg, okay, which started from this topological property, and he abstracted it to this homotopy extension lemma, okay, which is a property that spaces satisfy, coming from this retract property. And then what he noticed was that you can develop topology, algebraic topology, in an axiomatic way, starting from this homotopy extension property. Okay, so the idea will be that this homotopy extension property actually is what we want, how to formulate the notion of equivalence relations, and how to get the transport principle. So this Eilenberg condition can be expressed internally in the model in this way. So I don't want to go into the detail, but so it's possible to formulate this Preshift model Eilenberg's condition, and this condition will imply what we want, the transport principle in this. Okay. And so what I want to explain is that the technical problem which appears when one does this is that this condition is expressed. We want a condition which is expressed in the context gamma, that this condition is expressed in this path context. Okay, so the main point of this talk, of this second part of this talk, is this remark, which is purely technical, is that it has this application for this model, is that the path functor that we have for cubical set has the right adjunct. So that's a nice property. So what does it mean? It means that we have an operation on Presheaf, so that this is isomorphic, naturally isomorphic to this. And we have, from this, we derive a dependent version of this fact. Okay, so we have an operation on type T in the context gamma to the I, which will express these conditions by type over the context gamma. Okay? So in this way, we solve these technical issues that we had the condition that was expressed on this context, and we wanted the condition which is expressed in this context. So now, once we have this, yeah, so that's remarkable. It's the same holds for a nominal set, actually. And so that we on D notice that, I mean, this adjunction, so for nominal set, it's known that this adjunction does not internalize, and the same probably holds for cubical set. Just a remark. So what happens when we use this? So when we use this, is that we can do something which looks like what Robin Gandhi was doing, because we can express. We want to formulate an extra condition which expresses that this relation is actually an equivalence relation. And this will be expressed internally by a type C of A, which will be expressed in the same context as A, which expresses that A is an higher order equivalence relation. And then how does the model proceed? Well, we build a proof that the pi operations preserve the fact that we are an equivalence relation. And then we prove that the sigma preserves the fact that we are an equivalence relation. And, surprise, the type of all type being an equivalence relation is itself an equivalence relation. Last part. So, and now, once we have this, it's a purely syntactical operation. We have the following situations. We have type theory with this predicate C, which is stable by type forming operation, and so that sigma x in U, C of x, itself satisfies C. Once we have this, we have a purely internal interpretation, which interprets a type as a type having the property of being an equivalence relation. And this is this can be described so as internal operations, so purely syntactical transformation on terms, and which is especially simple for applications and abstractions. So this is compositional. And then for pi operations, so what happens is that so this A.2 is a proof actually that this type A.1 is a good type. So good types are preserved by type forming operations. So, and that's exactly what happens when we do this model where we interpret a type as a can simplification set. So this C of x represents the property of being can in the cubical set model. So we see, so one application of this this way of formulating the model as an internal model, almost internal model construction, is that the exact form of this constant do not matter for getting a model. So we can use any constant pi c of this type. Okay? It does not matter which one it is. We will get a model at the end. So that's a good remark because I mean there are different actual ways of proving that can types are stable by pi operations. But this does not influence the fact of having a model. What it influences is the computation property of the model. And in the simplicial set model, So the situation is quite different because this property of having a right adjoint doesn't hold. Sorry. Well, at least it's
Representables are not close to
Conjecture.
finite products.
yes,
Yeah.
and representable. Yeah, exactly. So this doesn't hold, and this probably that's question for specialists.
But it's still it's not closed under product, but it's still sifted, so.
So it
see
will
probably
it will have a right adjoint.
maybe.
Okay, so that's a question mark. I don't know about this. But so one difference between the simplification set model and this cubical set model is that in the cubical set model, so we compute something which will be used for computation. In the simplification set model, to satisfy this C of A is defined as a property and not as a structure. Okay. So that was a very quick description, but it was, I mean, second part was for specialists in model of type theory, and I will stop.
I'd like to try and understand better what exactly is the block to just starting with Martin of type theory and doing a construction entirely within it to, the analog, as it were, of
Mhm.
Gandhi's thing.
Yeah.
So is it that you can't express what the category of cubes is very easily, or I mean it's
So that's already a problem for reflexive. So it's already a problem for reflexive graph. So it's not clear how to do the reflexive graph model in an internal way. And the problem is with expressing reflexivity. This you can express, that the graph is reflexive.
yeah.
But when you want to express the notion of morphism between reflexive graph, you have to ask, what about the proof of reflexivity?
Yeah.
Should it be sent? So it should be sent to the proof of reflexivity, but with propositional or judgmental
It
equality.
shouldn't be sent on the nose to.
On the node, yeah. But this you cannot express internally, and that's a problem. And if you start to express it as a propositional equality, it's not clear what's going on. And so there are work by Boss and Edberg actually on this, looking at the reflexive graph model, trying to do it internally. And this is work in progress. Maybe this will work. But so far, I don't know anybody. Describe this as a model.
Could you say something about this? I mean, in the original Gandhi thing,
Yeah.
you're really using partial equivalence relations.
Yeah.
So, why does that partial equivalence relation disappear from?
Yes, because you first you interpret reflexively. Yeah, so actually it will be interesting to look at the connections between. You can do this as other description of for simple type theory. First doing reflexive, you interpret the type as a reflexive relation, and then you prove by induction on the type that this reflexive relation is an equivalence relation.
Yeah.
So then you will have only total equivalence relation in this way. But you're right. So Gandhi, Gandhi he expressed this partial equivalence relation as a predicate mode, and then a equivalence relation on this predicate. So this actually, in this way of doing things, you consider only total equivalence relation. So that's a good point. Yeah.
So Kreska Pocket and I do actually have a version of the reflexive graph model, which is in our preprint on the homotopy theory of type theories.
Sorry, is
We do have a slightly different version of the reflexive graph model
Oui.
in our preprint on the homotopy theory of type theory. So I don't know if it's close enough to the one that you were looking for that it might work for your purposes.
So then you should
So maybe
definitely
talk about
talk
that.
with Edberg and Boss. And
Yeah, we should.
I am really interested in this, yes, that's really interesting. Because hopefully it can be generalized to once we have reflexive graph, we should have maybe the next step. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
So,
you.
Chairman. You were the chairman.
Oh, yes.
You already asked for questions.
Yeah.
Thank you for the most interesting talk.